Welcome, everyone. Greetings. We're so
Hi,
excited. Well, I'm so excited I cut you off, Annie, before
that's
I
okay. I
let you
just said
say
hi.
hello.
Just hi.
We're so excited because here today with us is Alyse Bacine. Alyse is a breathwork and trauma expert with 23 years of experience, a spiritual mentor, channel, and the CEO of Alyse Breathes LLC. She has her master's degree in counseling psychology and certifications in both social, emotional learning, and mindfulness practices, as well as an extensive background in the mental health field, where she served as a school counselor for 10 plus years and received a grant to implement a meditation program at her school. Knowing that she always wanted to expand her mission of healing familiar and ancestral trauma and normalizing meditation and breathwork practices, she opened her own business and quickly became a six-figure mentor. Alyse has been featured in top publications like Oprah Magazine, Well and Good, and Nylon. Alyse uses her unique healing modality, the Metamorphosis Method, to help spiritually intelligent women transform their current realities to get to their next level selves. Her programs are deeply rooted in healing so that women can navigate work, love, and life as powerful leaders without the burden of trauma playing a role in their highest potential. So we have a lot to learn from you, Alyse, today, and welcome again for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I'm excited to hear more about the metamorphosis method, which I wouldn't dare say 5 times in a row without becoming tongue-tied. So if you could tell us a bit more about that method.
Yeah, for sure. So it's pretty much just a accumulation of my very extensive background as a breath worker and in the healing field, and then also as a school counselor, working with traumatized children for, a decade plus. And over time, I developed this methodology that just kind of happened. So just to give you a little background of kind of like where this all came from. So I discovered breath work at age 19, so in 2001. And at that time, no one really knew what it was. And I never even told anyone about it because I never felt like trying to explain it to anyone. So
I can relate to that.
yeah, but I discovered it at a very young age and I was just very drawn to it. And I did a ton of trainings and I became a breathwork facilitator in my early 20s. And I started teaching and sharing it, from a very young age. And then so it's something that I've always shared. It's something that's always been part of me, at this point for more than half of my life. So that's kind of where it all started. And then, I think when I was young, I didn't really have the capacity yet to fully start my own business. So I became a school counselor. My parents were both teachers and I did that for a long time and I was really good at it. But as I went on, I kind of always knew I would be doing something more than that. And then in 2019, I got the very strong nudge to like move forward and start my business. So and when I did that, the first group program I developed was called the Metamorphosis. And when I started it, I literally just thought that I was going to be creating these tools for people to help them use breath work to heal. And then when people started going through the program, what I realized is that they were majorly transforming, healing, and dissolving familial and ancestral trauma. So then as that started happening, I was like, okay, I really have something here. And then I really started to hone in on the steps of what I was doing and articulate it and like put all the pieces together, like the breath work piece, the trauma healing tools, the energy work piece, because it's just those three components mainly. And then I was like, okay, I need to teach this to other people. So that's when I started my certification and I started teaching other people how to facilitate this methodology, which is really just based in breath work, this specific kind of breath work that I have created, along with the trauma healing tools that I've created, and then an energy work process that I've created. But the whole purpose of it is really to get to the root of why you continue to repeat the same patterns over and over again, or why you come up against the same challenges over and over again, and like where did that start. And usually at some point in your childhood, what I call your core wound. So I help people access that. And then I have a whole process for healing and reconciling the inner child. And then a lot of the work that I do is based on helping women, based on that knowledge, be able to use the circumstances in their life, like their relationships or their business, to heal those patterns through being able to see how they're showing up in front of them, and then doing the healing through that to respond to it differently and create a permanent result.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's
incredible.
amazing.
And you were so before your time. I mean,
That's what I was going to say.
everyone is trying to like touch on this stuff. Not everyone, but and breathwork is so popular and all these things, but you like were the pioneer.
Yeah,
One of them.
like just to make a transition, like, having practiced law for close to 2 decades and transitioning my work into being a mindfulness teacher, like that's can feel overwhelming, and sort of it's like unfamiliar territory when you've been doing something so long. But like you said, you get that strong nudge, like this is how I can really support people and help other people. But when you made the transition, like something that maybe was a bit more taboo, like that, I would imagine took a lot of courage, from leaving something that on some level there was like I would imagine like more stability, like you've been teaching,
Mhm.
it, and there was a need, but then to sort of venture into this unknown, not as popular of a field, that I think what's coming up for me is a lot of courage and
Bravery.
yeah, bravery. So that's amazing. So you integrate in the metamorphosis method, you integrate, it sounds like there's a mindfulness component, there's trauma healing and breath work. So I'm just interested in the program, like how do they all come together?
Yeah, so the way that it is set up is it's really about reconciling like these major pieces of your development. So your birth story, your relationship with your mother, your relationship with your father, and your relationship with your sibling. So one of the very unique components of my work is birth story, which a lot of people don't talk about.
Yeah.
So I use the mainly my breath work and my other tools to help you access your subconscious mind and reconcile like the circumstances surrounding your birth. So basically it's from conception until you were about 3 months old, whatever was happening during that time. So your mom, whatever was happening with her, whatever was happening in the world, your parents' relationship with each other, everything. Like, were you wanted, were you not wanted, were you a C-section, was there it like an emergency, did your mom have really bad anxiety, like did they want you to be a girl and you were a boy, or whatever it is. All of these things have an impact, and it really is different for everybody, just depending on, because from a trauma perspective, trauma is a perspective, right? It's not like the same for everybody. Like when I was a school counselor, I would always say there could be like two siblings who live in the same house, have the same exact parents, and their response to what's going on is completely different, right? One is like totally traumatized, the other one is appearing completely fine, right? So it's really a matter of how you perceive certain situations and how you have internalized certain energies and respond to what's happening in your environment. But the birth story is a lot harder for people to grasp, just because you wouldn't have any conscious memories of it. It's more like an imprint on your psyche, and something that I would call like an energetic overlay. It's like a lens that you look at the world through. So it would impact like the way that you start things. So what are you expecting to happen when you start a business, or what are you expecting to happen when you enter the room, right? Like I noticed
Yeah.
for a lot of people whose parents like either didn't want them or wanted them to be a different gender, like they're already expecting people to be disappointed in them or not want them, right? So stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then also just the general energy that your parents had. Like, were they scared? Did they not feel safe? Were they having financial issues? Were they like unstable? All of that is going to impact your just the way that you see the world, the way that you relate to yourself, the way that you relate to the world, and what kind of place you think the world is. So we look at that. And for every module, I have a breathwork session that's like a recording that I talk you through different pieces of accessing the subconscious around these specific relationships. And then, there's like a journaling component to it. And then I really have you go deep into being able to recognize what I call patterns and parallels. So, what are the general patterns that you developed based on your not only relationships with your parents, but also how you witness them relate to each other and relate to themselves and the world? And then what ideas and beliefs you internalize based on what you witness. And then you go through and you kind of just like dissect all of that. And we come to like a really deep understanding of why you're experiencing what you're experiencing at the deepest level. And then we address the inner child and go through the process of like reconciling that. Because what I always say is that you think the issue is like this person or this situation or whatever, but it's actually all just your inner child. So if you can address what's actually happening instead of what you think is happening, then
Right.
you create change a lot more quickly. So all of my tools are literally just based around helping you much more easily recognize and address what's actually happening versus trying to, like play like whack-a-mole and try to like hit everything around you that then it just keeps popping up again because you actually didn't change.
Wow. It's so interesting.
Fascinating.
It makes so much sense as you're saying, as you're explaining this. I see a lot of overlap too. At least I see like the mindfulness component pretty clearly, and that perspective piece, that like the way in which we're perceiving something, the way we choose to look at it can make a difference in how we experience the present moment. So that's that's a similar sort of what we teach in the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. I'm curious about the breath practices, the breath work, if it's similar to the breathing practices that we teach in the MBSR program or some of the traditional mindfulness practices. But what does the breath work look like with your
So
program?
I have a really, a strong perspective on the breath work, especially as I've developed it over time. So I really believe that the breath doesn't need to be controlled or forced, but actually when you create this container and this space for your body to move energy and heal, it naturally just knows what to do. So the breath that I teach is super simple and super gentle. It's called conscious connected breathing, and it's just like a circular breath. So you breathe in and out through the mouth in a circular pattern with no space between the inhale and the exhale. But what you're really doing is you're dropping into your body's natural way of breathing and moving energy. So it's much less about like trying to do it a certain way or forcing it. And it's more about just dropping into this rhythm that your body naturally has so that you can move the energy that's supposed to move and access whatever it is you're supposed to access.
Yeah.
And that's going to be different every single time, because there's a lot of different components to what the breath work does. There's the subconscious component. So the breath work is one of the most powerful and quickest ways to access the subconscious mind. And most of the work that I'm doing with people is going to be accessing their subconscious, because a lot of the things that we address and we uncover is all in your subconscious. It's not going to be you're not walking around being like, my inner child isn't feeling safe. Like, no one does that, right? So we have to access the subconscious mind. And the breath work is a really powerful way to do that. And then also, just on a very practical level, most people are walking around with a ton of suppressed emotional energy because no one teaches you how to deal with your emotions. So most people have a ton of suppressed emotional energy. So the breath allows you to move through and process like what's there so that you can then start to be more in present time and not be moving around the world just reacting to the past. And then also have more of an awareness of like what your experience actually is versus thinking it's about something that is just sitting there in your system that you haven't processed. So it allows you to do that. And then it also allows you to access the present moment, you know, the quantum field, your higher self, and this level of knowing, creativity, and understanding of like what you're actually meant to do, how you're actually meant to move in the world. And the other thing I started to notice as people went through this program is just this natural byproduct would be everybody just automatically knew like what they were supposed to do. Like it was like, oh, I'm meant to help people with this and I'm going to start a business doing that, or I'm meant to create this thing. Like that just starts to happen because people they untangle themselves from the wounding from childhood and the programming and these different relational dynamics so that they're able to access their, you know, the authentic version of themselves and allow that to come forward. So that just becomes like this natural byproduct with people. And it literally, I see it with every single person, basically. And if it's somebody who already kind of knows that, they'll be able to access it on a deeper level or just come into a much deeper level of confidence and knowing and have an easier time making decisions, taking action and moving forward because they have this new level of, you know, safety and security within themselves because they've acknowledged the things that they haven't yet acknowledged.
Do you find a lot of resistance about, I mean, I guess if they're joining your program, they sort of already know the concepts, but like regarding, you know, jumping into childhood trauma and things like that, I mean, I find a lot of resistance. That's part of the, like with my coaching, some of the walls I have to knock down and it takes some time, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't, it's interesting because like obviously the work that I do is very like frontward facing, like this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And you know, and a lot of the content that I create and the marketing I do is all based around like this is the actual reason why you're not.
Yeah. So everybody knows going in. So you're not gonna.
Yeah, so a lot of the people that I work with have gotten to the point where it's like, okay, I learned all the business strategy. I tried to like change my mindset. I did all of these things, and why is it still not working? And some people even, you know, have done some personal growth work, you know, but they still just haven't been able to create that result. So that's where people are usually at now but there is nuance to it because sometimes people will have resistance to the process, or like what I find for people where the resistance can come in is like when I ask you to, you know, part of my process is you have to go there with your emotions. Like you have to be willing to feel really uncomfortable and deep emotions. And some people will have trouble with that, or they will kind of methodically or what I call like surgically move through the process without fully like feeling it
In
or
it, yeah.
embodying it.
Like
Yeah.
they're guarded a bit,
Like
like they're kind of
transactional versus in it.
Yeah, exactly. So they're not fully, and that's okay because as long as they keep going, they will
Yeah.
eventually. Like I've had clients that have been with me for like 2, 3 years, and finally we've like gotten to it, you know, or they've like, I mean, I've told them what it is, but they've gotten to the point where they've allowed themselves to fully like acknowledge and feel it. So it does take time and there are many layers to it, but that also doesn't mean that like it has to take a long time. Like with this work, you can come in and start to see results immediately. But also, if you continue to do it, you will continue to see more and more longer lasting permanent results over time.
so
Sitting in
not
discomfort, I think sorry, Court. Sitting in discomfort, I think is one of the hardest things for not only my clients, but people in general to do. It's no one wants to be uncomfortable, right? It's just
Of
like
course.
change makes us uncomfortable. Sadness is, you know, we have been taught right now, I need to take care of that feeling. I don't like the way it feels versus sitting in it, right? So it's very interesting you focus on kind of just being in it. And
Yeah,
then
and like that's what I support you with, right? So everything that I create and the way that I create my programs and containers is to make you feel very supported in going there. You know, that's where my expertise lies. So I think that that is why people do get the results that they get, is because they feel very safe and held in a space where they can go there. And even though they don't want to, they feel like, okay, well, if it's going to be anywhere, it's going to be here, you know. But yeah, but you're right, it's not comfortable. And I've had so many people, I can't even tell you, that have like danced around doing the metamorphosis and have done like everything else with me and been in my audience for so long. And it's like after like 2 or 3 years, they're finally like, okay, I'm ready.
So subconscious too, right? It's not like they're like, I'm not going to do this. It's like they just dance around it instead of going through it because it's painful. Not necessarily your program is painful, but to sit in discomfort,
it is
feel the things, you know, it's like feeling the things is hard. Some of it is painful.
I was going to say, it's not for the faint of heart. Like there has to be a certain level of courage. And sort of sometimes when we have people come to our programs at Jefferson for mindfulness, it's like when you've explored everything else and you're not seeing yourself work through what it is you want to free yourself of or get to the next level, whether it's you're trying to grow your business or excel, maybe even your personal life. But I think it takes exploring other options. And then when you see like nothing's changing, it's like, okay, then maybe you're more open to being with discomfort or working through something that's really challenging. But I do think just like mindfulness with turning towards what we often turn away from, like what's uncomfortable or what doesn't necessarily make us feel good. But with a light of mindfulness, we say we little by little, as we're willing to turn towards it, it's so healing and it opens doors that otherwise would remain shut. So I like to acknowledge that I think it sounds like from what you're describing, just that deep courage that people have to take where they are to another level.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that's like, and I think that that's why mostly who I end up working with is business owners, because when you're a business owner, you're kind of forced to do this, because if you don't, then you're just going to be stuck in the same place, you know? And I have a lot of women who like are in what I call purgatory, where it's kind of that like 1 foot in, 1 foot out of like, I know I want to do this, but for some reason I can't move forward if they're like scared or it's this or it's that, but really it's this, you know? So I think that's why I end up working with so many business owners, because people who don't, and I don't have all business owners, right? I do have women who are just wanting to do this work because they know they need to. But I think like the business kind of forces you to look at the things that you wouldn't necessarily look at within yourself in order to grow, you know? So much of my work is kind of oriented towards helping women move through these things as it's related to their business, because, you know, that's just a lot of who ends up coming to me.
Right. I think that's similar to you, Annie. Annie deals with a lot of leaders, top executives, and she also has a certain framework called the breath framework.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, it's called breath framework, but it's not breath work. It's just, it's a word that is really important to me, and it's an acronym. So it's what we're talking about. It stands for begin where you are, reclaim your power, excavate your core values, allow through, and heal. So it's like taking them through my process, right, of getting to a healing place. And when I was just going to bring up, what I try to paint for them is like what you're going toward is actually freedom, right? Like, don't you think that these people, when you say purgatory, they're shackled, they're weighed down, ball and chain, shackled by whatever it is that's what, you know, on them. And your program and mine in a different way kind of take you through that. And when you go through in mine, you're sitting in it. Right? And it's uncomfortable, but when you go through instead of around, you get to heal. And then when you're healed, I actually don't say healed, because you never really are fully healed in my opinion, but you're healing, then you get to freedom, right? And isn't that like the ultimate goal, just to be free to be you and who we really are, right? You said authentic self.
Yeah, there's so much overlap between what each of you, I mean, from different angles, but what you can help others to achieve. And we had Gary Miles on, who I don't know if you know of him, but he was on a couple episodes ago. He works with a lot of his clientele. It happens to be lawyers and legal professionals. And he helps people to more or less identify how the ways in which they're stuck, or how they can, what's holding them back from freeing themselves and living their most authentic, joyful lives. But what's so awesome about what you're doing is that, similar to mindfulness, which is innate, and I know there's the mindfulness component, everything it sounds like that you're teaching people, it's all here within. So like, you don't have to go buy this, that, and the other. You don't have to seek anything out. Rather, it's all here. It's already with each individual. It's just a matter of diving in, like gently
Accessing it.
exploring. So it's all here. So just like when we teach how in our mindfulness programs that the breath, how healing it can be, like the total package, you can literally heal yourself without having to go get anything, take anything. It's all right here within the body. And we've spoken about this in so many different episodes, Annie and I, with each other and with guests, but how enormously empowering that is for women, leaders, top executives, to feel that without, set aside their degrees, their training, but like the body and our ability to really feel just how, like, tap into how powerful we are, like right now in this moment. So I think that what it is, this whole package between the breath work and the mindfulness and trauma healing, like it's really, I'm not trained in it, but it's really powerful just hearing you talk about it. Yeah. Can you give us any examples? Like, I know you and I had met in Philadelphia. For listeners here, we have the three of us. We have a lot in common here, being that we're all from Philly. But when we met, you told me a bit about your personal experience and how these types of modalities have really healed you. Can you share with us an example, whether it's your own or a client that you've served? Can you share with us a really positive transformation that they've experienced in working with you?
Yeah. I mean, I can start with myself and then I'll give some other examples. So just so you can kind of know, like, you know, for my own, the way that I kind of developed a lot of these things is out of necessity for myself. And also
That
I saw other women going through, like, a lot of the processes that I've created, like, subsequently after the metamorphosis, because I have a bunch of other programs, but they're mostly all rooted in the trauma process that I've created in the metamorphosis, but I've created like these other tools and processes that are all just based on things I saw people going through. And I'm like, oh, all right, we're going to create a process for this. We're going to create a process for this, you know? So being able to just like you get so much information just from working with people. And that's why I feel so strongly, like in my certification, from day one, they're doing practice sessions. Cause I'm like, the only way you're going to know what you're capable of is just start working with clients. So
Yeah.
just as a PSA for anybody who's like, should I start a business? Like, yes, just start working with people and you'll figure it out. But anyway, like for me, I think a lot of, you know, I think I had two kind of big waves of healing and personal growth. One is what I mentioned when I was 19, when I discovered breathwork. And at that time, I was struggling with an eating disorder and anxiety. And I was just looking for answers because I was like, why am I miserable? Like, I didn't understand why. Like, I had a nice upbringing, you know, like my parents gave me what I needed. Like, so I was like, what is going on? So I discovered yoga and then I discovered breathwork, and that helped me heal tremendously, you know, at that time in my life. And then I think like kind of the second wave was at what I described in 2019 when so what happened was I was a school counselor at the same school for a long time. And I ended up getting a new job at this school that was like, in my eyes, my dream job. You know, it was this really awesome school that wanted me to do everything that I do. They helped me create this meditation program. They bought me everything I wanted for it. Like I had yoga mats and weighted blankets for everyone. Like it really was a dream job. The principal like loved me and let me do whatever I wanted. And I got a raise. And when I got there, I was like, all right, this isn't it. Like I was like, this is not what I actually want to do. And then from there, it was kind of like a snowball of like, okay, it's time for me to do my own thing and start my business. And then that really took me on another huge, healing and transformational journey, for many reasons, as businesses do. I think that it brought up a lot for me just around veering away from what my family has done. As I mentioned, my parents, and as much personal growth work as I've done, my parents were both teachers in the school district of Philadelphia. And there I am, like a school counselor in the school district of Philadelphia. Like, so I was still kind of on that path. And to break away from that and, do something completely different. And it was very scary. And there was a lot that had to come up for me to heal. And also my husband at first was not really on board because it was COVID. And he's like, you can just work from home, like just work from home and do your business. It doesn't make sense. Why do you need to leave your job? And so I had to basically convince him like, no, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm sorry, and it was so scary. Because eventually he became supportive. Obviously, he like works for me now. But at first he was like, this is not, I don't want you to do this. It doesn't make sense. Because on paper, it didn't make sense. But in my being, I just knew that I had to dive in full force into it. And that brought up so much fear and so much just feeling kind of like untethered, like I had no safety net. And mind you, I literally didn't. I didn't even have, because, as a school counselor, you don't make any money. So I didn't even have any savings. I had nothing. I just like was like, all right, like
I'm going to do it.
I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So that I kind of threw my.
People are always like, Annie, did you raise capital? I'm like, no, there's no capital. Like I was the capital.
Yeah.
I was investors in my company.
Yeah.
It's just me.
No. And like, I will say, I just want to put this like disclaimer, I will say that I think one of the differences for me is I did have this very long, extensive background with this work, right? So breath work and helping people heal had been something that I had been doing for, 20 years. So I had that. So it was like, I always felt really confident in my ability. It was just more around the business stuff. And then also just like my confidence in myself and my ability to like really do this and really build something, and that is what I continued to come up against, along with many other things like feeling like a failure, feeling like I'm going to fail, thinking that like I'm not good enough. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this. And also not really feeling supported necessarily by the people around me, because it was kind of like no one really understood what I was doing. Like they weren't surprised, but they also were just like, okay, whatever, Alyse.
Like, like Alyse, when are you getting your real job? Like I feel like I heard that like a couple times. Like this is my job. Like this is what I'm doing for a career. And it was just like a lot of people don't get that. When you make this into a thing, which you have, yes, you have the experience, but when you make it into your thing, they're like, okay, like, is this your hobby? And it's like,
exactly. So I think like in the beginning, a lot of the tools that I've created that I now use with my clients, and even everything from the Metamorphosis, was really just also what I saw happening for myself, as I went through this process. And really being able to see at the deepest level what was happening, and then creating things to address it, so, and because I think I had the knowledge and awareness of that, I was able to move through that stuff really quickly. And I mean, pretty quickly, I started making my same money that I was making in my job. Actually, the very next month that I went full time, I started making the same money that I was making in my job. And then within, like 4 months, I think I had my first like 10K or 20K month, and I just sustained it from there.
That's
You know,
awesome.
but I also very much attribute it to this like trauma perspective that I have, because even though like this was not easy, like the way I'm describing it now sounds like, oh yeah, like this was not easy. And there's like been many times of just like very much like heart-wrenching, like, but I think like being able to use the tools that I have to, and the awareness to like move through these things and come out on the other side and keep going, has been really, I think that's what I attribute to the speed that I've been able to grow it with, and also to sustain the income that I've been able to sustain over, the last 4 years essentially. So that's something that I really attribute to this work for sure. I mean, obviously I had other help and support and worked with various mentors, but I think at the end of the day, it really just came down to like my own inner.
Experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean, it's one thing to get degrees, wonderful, like
Yeah.
psyched, and it's another thing to go through this yourself, right? Like I didn't learn my stuff in a book. Like,
Yeah.
No matter what degree I have or certification, that's awesome, but this is from life experience. That's sort of what I tell people, and I feel like you're saying this.
Yeah.
Not that you're not educated, you're plenty educated, but you know
Right.
how to deal with people because of your experiences.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to highlight, because that's where, again, I see an overlap between you and Annie. And I think that is what makes the three of us, respectively, in the work that we do, where our own experiences, I think, make us that much better at helping others. Because the fact that, like, depending on you said you had a good background, upbringing, and your parents, they gave you what you needed. But I think despite whether or not your background is sort of like smooth coasting or there's more turbulence, whatever that is, combined with whatever's coming up for us now, like we can relate to the people who are taking our programs or who that we're working with. Like from a personal experience, I have for the longest time suffered with anxiety. And so now it brings me so much joy being that I'm a lawyer and I can relate to the stressors of working in the legal sector. And I know that anxiety is real, that it can be debilitating. So like, I'm proud of that, like what the life experience I have, because I think it only gives me more tools to help others. And I love what I'm hearing from you, Alyse, with like, and Annie, I know from how much we know each other and all the episodes we've done, what you've been through makes you that much more remarkable in what you do. But I also wanted to highlight the fact that I think it's incredible that someone like your husband doesn't necessarily have to be our husband or significant others, but people in our lives who we care what they think, and like they're maybe our strongest supporters. It could be a sibling, a best friend. When they're not in our corner necessarily, I don't know about you, but like that really affects my confidence. Like if something's really calling my attention, like you, like there's going to be the momentum, the drive, nothing's going to get in my way. But it makes all the difference to have someone, whether it's your spouse or a loved one or a close friend, to be in your corner. So the fact that you didn't necessarily, I mean, now I know it's a different story, but your husband wasn't necessarily like rooting you on to do this, no less during a pandemic. So I have a feeling that nothing is going to get in your way. Like the momentum that you have now, like nothing's going to stop you. But the last thing I wanted to add is we've brought this up in other episodes, like the not knowing if you're good enough, not knowing if you can do it or if you have enough skill. I think I've taken, I honestly, I think I've joked about this, but I do think it's the right number. I think I've taken the foundational program, the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, like 8 times now. And every time there's never like, I would probably take it 8 more, but it does take a certain amount of confidence. And when you start seeing the results in the people that you're helping, that lets you know that, okay, you're in the right place, you're doing the right thing. And it sounds to me like you've seen that a multitude of
I mean, I
times.
live for that. Like, there's nothing
Yeah.
that makes me happier than like, I have a woman in the metamorphosis right now who's like, I've literally been doing healing work for 20 years and nothing has like impacted me like this,
Yeah.
like to hear that kind of thing or
Nothing lights you up more, right?
yeah, because it's like,
what-
okay, like this is working, this is helping people. And also like my clients who've been with me for so long, like I just had a woman who she's been with me for about 2.5 years, working with me privately, and she really wanted to like, loosen the reins a little bit and like go out on her own a little bit. So now we're still working together, but it's more she's in my membership and we have a lot less proximity. And at the end of the container, like after 2.5 years, I was like, this is like a celebration for everything that you've created. And I actually made her like a whole Google Doc of like all of the results that she created and like all the changes she's made, because it's incredible. Like it's very noteworthy, and like I send her gifts. Like my husband and I have another business. We have a gifting business. So I send people gifts for like these things, and like she got her gift yesterday and like it's just like we're all crying, it's like so it's just there's
rewarding.
nothing better
Yeah.
than
I would take that Google Doc that you made, if it was something like someone made that, and I would blow it
Frame
up.
it.
And the door that I go in and out of every day, it would be like plastered right there. So I remember like
Actually,
I'm
a good
hitting
method. It's a good system for people to have. A good habit to form is make your own Google Doc and plan it on
post.
your door of some of your accomplishments. It's probably pretty
yeah.
rewarding to read them.
Yeah, no, I love like now I've been doing that a lot for my clients who have been working with me for a long period of time, because I'm like, okay, let's like take a step back
Step back.
here and look, like let's do like a review, and like
Yeah.
because a lot of this work too is so internal that a lot of times you don't realize that you have changed, and so much of what I focus on with people is just reflecting those smaller things back to them so that they can see them. Because a lot of times you just don't see it unless someone points it out to you. Like if they tell me a story or something and I'm like, wait, you responded to your husband like that?
Exactly. That is
Like,
not how you
okay,
used to.
like, yeah, exactly. But they don't realize until you tell them.
Elise, what would you say to listeners who are really inspired by what they're hearing and the results that you're helping others to achieve, but they're a little bit skeptical about some of the modalities you've spoken about? What do you hope that they'll take away from what it is that you have to offer, and your approach in helping others deal with trauma and learning breath work?
Yeah, well, I would say if you feel drawn to it, then it's most likely for a reason. So trust that. And you can also download one of my free, like I have a breath work you can download, or I have it's called Clear Trauma from Your Business Cheat Sheet, where I go over like the 4 major types of trauma and how to know if that's what's coming up for you. And you can get that too and see if that resonates for you.
Is that from, you said, is it your website?
Yeah, you could get them on my website or on my Instagram. And also you could listen to my podcast too. That's like a very non-committal way to see if this work is going to work for you. It's called Reclaiming Consciousness.
Okay, and we'll be sure to include in both the YouTube video and Spotify, your website, Instagram, and podcast. But if you want to just give a shout out to those listening, if you just want to mention those that way.
Oh yeah. So my Instagram is Alyse_breathes. And then my website is alysebreathes.com. And then my podcast is Reclaiming Consciousness. And I do a lot of like solo teaching episodes on there along with client interviews. So it's a really great way to understand what it's like to be in my world or what it's like to work with me.
Okay.
Awesome.
Anything more that you want to share with listeners? I know that I could spend with so many of our guests, I'm learning so much, but I know I could easily spend another hour asking you questions about your methodology. But anything that you want to share with listeners before we close for the day?
Um, I'm sure I can think of something. I think, what I just said before, I think one of the most important things for people who are kind of just going down this path of self-discovery or transformation is to really just trust what you're drawn to and trust what you want to do, and don't make it about other people and what they're going to think or how they're going to respond, and just move forward in the way that you are really led intuitively.
I just followed you on Instagram, so
Awesome.
got another follower today.
Thank you so much, Alyse. I've enjoyed my time together with you. I've learned a lot, and I look forward to learning more in what it is you have to share on social. So thank you again.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having
Alyse.
me.